all right, creators, now's the time. Writers, go write. Like, go. This is when the diverse voices are critical, because it's through art that we sort of make sense of the world around us. I mean, that's what cultural production is meant to do, to help us frame what seems so unreal. It seems so surreal that you go, what is going on here? No matter where you are on the side of the aisle, that you go, I need some help making sense of all this. And this is where artists, creators get to work.
Hi guys, welcome to the Creative Block. Today we're with Dr. Marcus Collins, a gifted communicator, educator, and author. In an earlier interview on this show, we discussed his best-selling book, For the Culture, diving into the relationship between culture and decision-making. He offers invaluable insights into navigating cultural currents and helping brands and community forge authentic connections. Dr. Collins, I wanted to reach out to you and talk because you have a unique ability to clarify and give perspective to complicated social events. I'm personally seeking ways to understand what is happening in this moment without the arguments and the heat and the divisiveness, and imagine what healthy dialogue could be. So thank you for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So post-election, tech leaders have, within reason, expressed congratulations to the new president. When I read these comments and quotes online, there's this hope of what it could be for them under this new administration. Consumer exposure to tech is rapidly increasing and changing. What cultural responsibilities do you think tech companies have in fostering these healthy, inclusive, conversations?
It's full of complexity, like all things that are cultural. One would say that these organizations, they operate with the help of many different cultural complexions and cultural makeups. And you would want those people to feel like they belong there more than just the transactional relationship between employee and employer, that they feel like they're seen, they feel like their voices are heard. There's also the many different expressions of culture that are manifested in the people who use these platforms. Talk about billions of people, quite literally, on these platforms. Clearly, there's a lot of heterogeneity there. And then there is the cultural spaces and places that are being negotiated and constructed on these platforms through these technologies that therefore require a cultural lens. And one would say that despite whatever side of the aisle you sit on, whatever your affinity or disposition with regards to diversity, with regards to representation, even if you are a stone cold capitalist, the idea of being able to connect with people in meaningful ways beyond the transactional to the ideological, culture becomes a very important, powerful factor in your ability to do that thing. Therefore, culture at the core of this thing is super important. But the challenge comes when we are operating within a cultural frame that encapsulates all of those things, or which all those things reside, and that's the culture of capitalism. Mm-hmm. And we see these leaders of tech companies engaging in the political process, not because of some sense of altruism, not because of some sense of ideological morality, but really because if this administration is in office, I have to make sure that I'm in their good graces so that I make more money, because I have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders and the stakeholders that my company serves. And oftentimes those two opposing forces are at loggerheads. They are in conflict, and there is tension there, which makes it hard to not only watch as a civilian, as a person, as a citizen, but I like to believe that even for those practitioners, those business leaders may often have to set aside their own morality in an effort to live up to their fiduciary responsibility.
I'm getting more and more disheartened that there's less and less public servants in the room. And this trend of, I can run a corporation, so I know what communities need. I don't know if those are the same things.
Oh, I fully agree. Not only do we see business people running government or hoping to run government, which we'll see in the next administration, even if we just look at Trump's nominated picks for his administration, they all seem to mostly come from outside of politics, or better yet, outside of public service. And I think that's the right framing that you gave it. If the people who are in public service aren't thinking about the public, and the people who work in the commercial world aren't thinking about the public, then who's thinking about the people? I think that at the end of it all, when no one's thinking about the people, it's the people who will suffer.
I agree. Post-election, passions are pretty hot on each side. One group feels sudden power, there's this fist bumping and it's like finally our day. There might be another group that says this is going in the wrong direction or potentially backwards. What do you think about how we can use cultural symbols and stories or practices to foster empowerment and connection within a divided, or can we?
Well, in the world of marketing and communications, this very well, Vince, that like when we get feedback on our ideas, we're often told, I am critiquing the idea, not you. I'm giving you feedback on the creative idea, not you, the creator. Politics has creeped to a point where we are not debating the idea, the legislation, the political orthodoxy of what we think will get us to a better state. We are debating and critiquing the idea as an extension of the people, as an extension of the person.
Yeah.
And since we subscribe our identity to persons, therefore we have this sense of political tribalism that I think is probably more tangible than ever before. So even if it's a good idea, if that idea comes from you, I go, I don't know, man, because you are my mortal enemy, and therefore anything that comes out of you can't be good. You see that manifested during those like man on the street interviews. People go, I hate Obamacare, get rid of Obamacare, but don't get rid of the ACA. And you go, wait a minute, like the Affordable Care Act is Obamacare. You go, well, why would they name it that? So they name it that to villainize, to politicize the offering. So it's like the leaching of identity into politics, and therefore politics becoming a cultural badge of identity. We're always going to be at each other's necks when that's the case. Sad.
Yikes.
Yikes.
It's sad,
Right.
and I'm trying to frame these conversations without really giving weight to either side.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting a little fatigued about all of these conversations being weighted one side or the other.
100%.
And I'm certainly to blame for contributing to that. My hope in talking to you is that I'm trying to recognize my own bias and my own bubble and like, what am I missing here? Because obviously something's getting missed.
Yeah.
We are not, I don't feel like even the winners, I don't feel like are winning.
That is the most powerful statement I've heard, actually, in all this, that the winners aren't winning, and neither are the losers. I think there's a very small fraction of the population who are benefiting from where we are. And honestly, it's the people who were benefiting before we got here who just wanted more.
Yeah.
I think they're business leaders. I think they're media properties who, I mean, this is going to sound a bit crass, but I think it's actually apropos. I think it's war profiteering.
Yeah.
And as a result, the more calamity there is, the more money there is to be made. And while we're at each other's throats, we are not collectively clear-eyed, soberly looking at reality and going, hey, we're all getting screwed here.
I feel like the people in the war room are not, though. People pulling those strings and making those decisions about these directions will personally win. And so this feels like a vehicle to self-profit almost, at a pretty high cost.
That's right. That's right. And the result of that dynamic leads to just very long-term time horizon impact?
It seems like in this country, we're potentially headed for a different narrative that potentially could have global effects. I think of artistic expressions that came out of major events like, World War II or the Great Depression. When I was at MTV, I saw the culture of the hair bands nosedive off a cliff overnight, because of grunge. And so you have these changes in history and then the reactions of art and media from those changes. What do you think about the next cultural changes? I know you don't have a crystal ball. Based on where we've come from, what it looks like in tech and media in the next 4 years.
Yeah. I'm not sure about like tech and media as much as I think about us as creators. I mean, like this is a platform where we're creating cultural production. And I think that we're going to see a lot of introspection happening. You made a really good point about like after World War II, particularly in Germany, like a lot of the art got really, really dark, dark. And kind of, doing this self sort of interrogation, this self sort of inventory on who are we and how do we get here? And from a science perspective, we start to see this massive boom of the social sciences trying to study us. And it's in these moments of hyperbole, these moments of we are sort of the worst versions of ourselves, that we kind of stop and say, what in the world is going on here? My hope, prayerfully, God willing, inshallah, we see where we are right now as the worst versions of ourselves, at least where we've been in a long time, to sort of stop and kind of look. My pessimistic view of it all is that we still got a couple more miles to go until we have that awakening, until we have that sort of come to Jesus moment where we sort of stop and look inward. But until then, there's still going to be a lot of celebration from the supposed winners and a lot of finger pointing from the supposed losers, until we collectively go, hey guys, I think none of this is working for any of us. I saw a post after the election. Essentially, the gist was, all right, creators, now's the time. Writers, go write. Like, go. This is when the diverse voices are critical, because it's through art, as you know, it's through art that we sort of make sense of the world around us. I mean, that's what cultural production is meant to do, to help us frame what seems so unreal. It seems so surreal that you go, what is going on here? No matter where you are on the side of the aisle, that you go, I need some help making sense of all this. And this is where artists, creators get to work.
It's funny because I even found myself Googling poems, and I'm not even a big poem person, but a few years ago, I heard somebody read a poem about, the loss of a loved one. And I was like, man, that really capsulizes an emotion in a way I never considered.
Yeah.
And so it made me pull a thread to listen to other poets about times that are sort of similar to this.
Yeah.
Again, hopefully art comes out as a wedge in changing the culture. So
I feel a sense of urgency to speak up. And I don't mean speak up in like a revolutionary sense, but to weigh in the discourse. I feel a sense of obligation to not hold my tongue, but to also be very intentional about the way I use my voice.
And I greatly appreciate that. And I think you bring so much value. So I really, really appreciate your time today, Marcus. I know you're busy. I wanted to let you go, but thank you so much. This is really exactly what I wanted. You're one of the few voices that I can talk to have this kind of conversation without, going nuclear on Facebook. So, it's like, that doesn't work anymore. These are the kinds of conversations I want to have going forward. So, if there's any way I can help what you're doing, don't hesitate to reach out. And so I'm just super grateful. So thank you.
Oh man, the pleasure's all mine. Anytime you got the bat phone.